Hi, everyone. I'm here with Manju, and she is the CEO of Thimble, and I'm very excited to visit with her today. She's got a fantastic product, and I'm excited for what she's doing because this is going to be easy to explain. How many of you are afraid of needles? I mean, raise your hand. Most of us, I think, are afraid of needles, or at least get that little bit of jitters when they're ready to stab it into you. So actually, your company, Thimble, has come up with a way to make that a much more pleasant experience, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you, tell us a little bit about your background, what your educational background is and what the journey kind of you've taken now and what brought you to the point of saying, this is what I want to do in order to make a change.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up on the East Coast in Maryland, outside of DC, and I went to college in New York at Columbia, and I met my co-founder slash husband there. After college, I was a teacher for a year, and then went to medical school at University of Maryland, did all my training in dermatology back in New York. And about 5 years ago, I would say that's when we kind of started working on this. And kind of what brought us to this point was I have two daughters, and when I took my first daughter for her first set of vaccinations, I knew that this was going to be a good thing for her. I was a resident actually at that time, so I was feeling super empowered and all of that. And then, but when I took her for the shots, this look that she gave me of like terror and betrayal, and you don't think that, that a 1-month-old is capable of such looks, but it happened. And I think a lot of parents could attest to that. It really struck me, and it was like, well, what am I doing? Like, why am I not protecting her? And so I did going forward, I built myself contraptions and used prescription medications and all of those things to help protect her and my other daughter going forward. And it was just remarkably helpful, not just with shots, but with even ear piercings and things like that. And I thought, this is really unfair. I have all these privileges to give this to my own kids, but what about my patients and what about everybody else? So that was kind of the impetus for everything.
That's fascinating. And yes, you are an MD in dermatology, correct? And and so this also has other applications than just the the medical shot aspect of it that we will get into. But if I can ask you real quick, Manju, if you can give me a quick elevator pitch as far as if you had just less than a couple minutes to share everything that you're doing from problem solution, market, monetization, all of that. Give me a quick elevator pitch, and then we'll dive into that a little deeper.
Sure. So I'll kind of start from the beginning. So I'm Manju Dawkins, and I created Thimble, which is a platform of pain and anxiety reducing products for blood draws, injections, including vaccines. I'm a physician, I'm a patient, and I'm also a mom. And as I mentioned, the first time I took my daughter in for her shots, I knew what I was doing was in her best interest, but nothing really prepares you for that look of terror and betrayal in your child's eyes when they get their shots. And so from that moment on, I knew I had to make sure that no kid, and frankly, no person felt that way again. And the thing is, 1 in 4 adults now experience needle phobia, and 2 out of 3 kids are just like my daughter, afraid of needles. And the thing is, this needle phobia leads to avoidance of vaccines, blood tests, life-saving medications. And in fact, there was a recent Oxford study that showed that needle anxiety actually decreased COVID-19 vaccination rates by 10% in the UK. And so it shows that this avoidance costs not only the individual, but society as a whole. But the thing is, what if you could take all that away with just a simple patch, and an app? And so that's what we're trying to do. Our integrated portfolio of pain and anxiety reducing solutions address needle pain. And at the core is the patent pending Thimble patch, which is the first over-the-counter, safe, and affordable medicated product to minimize needle pain. But the patch is also paired with this web application that has extensive educational resources to help lower anxiety. So the question is, are you ready to change the way healthcare feels?
Okay, great, wonderful. So I think that's fairly self-explanatory, but let's delve into the actual. I think the problem I don't think we even have to expound on the problem. I mean, it's fairly evident, and I think anyone that's watching this, any of the investors are going to understand challenge with needles. Whether they personally have it or not, it's completely understandable. So let's talk about the patch itself in the app and how that helps reduce, actually reduce the pain and the anxiety in that.
Yeah. So actually, this is all based on research. Interestingly, needle phobia and needle pain has been pretty much ignored by the United States. And so a lot of literature comes out of Canada, UK, Australia. And there's a fantastic researcher named Anna Taddeo, who's really kind of codified what works and what doesn't. And the first most important thing you can do is address the pain of needles. So that is easy, right? It should be easy. It's just numbing the skin prior to the injection. And so that's what this patch is doing. Now, pain is multifactorial. It's not just physical, it's emotional, it's psychological. And so, you've got to address all of that. And again, Dr. Taddeo has laid out that what you can do to help that is breathing techniques, distraction. There are meditation techniques that can be used. And then beyond that, for people who are really severely needle phobic, things like cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, these are all things that can be helpful. And so it's really important to us to offer the app in conjunction with the physical product to really solve the problem holistically.
So with the patch then, is the patch put on, does it administer like some type of, for lack of better terms, being I'm not a medical person, like an anesthesiology kind of, and that type of application that helps numb the pain, then when the needle goes in, the patch is removed and then they stick it in, or does the needle go in through the patch, or explain that process?
Yes, there's a little bit that I can't really talk about on this video.
Okay.
But yes, the patch is applied before and it does deliver anesthetic into the skin. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. But so you apply it to the skin, you leave it on for about less than an hour. There's a variation in time, but it's less than an hour. And then you remove a part of it before the procedure, and then you inject through.
Okay.
And one thing that I think is probably important to mention is people would think, well, this does seem really easy. Why hasn't this been done before? But what's interesting is, one, the problem has been ignored. Two, the anesthetics that are out there are really designed to be left on the skin for about 8 to 12 hours. So you will see there are lidocaine creams on the market. There are prescription creams that combine lidocaine with other anesthetics. There are lidocaine patches out on the market. But again, all of these are meant to be left on the skin for 8 to 12 hours for long-term pain control. What we're trying to do is numb the skin as quickly as possible and minimize the amount of medication that is absorbed. So that way it's safe for kids, it's safe for adults, and it's safe for more frequent use. So hopefully that kind of clarifies things a little bit.
Sure. No, that and I appreciate that, because we don't have the visuals as much, but now being you have a patch to show, that's helpful. But of course, in the deck, you kind of cover some of those things. But so you mentioned there are certain things you can't talk about. Let's talk about IPs then, because that's probably part of the reason there are certain things you can't talk about.
Yes, exactly. So we have a very well-known IP law firm that's been helping us kind of from the beginning. And so we have one patent that's in conversion right now that protects both formulation as well as certain design aspects that the design elements actually have functionality as well, which is why I can't discuss everything just yet. And there are also 4 other patents pending. So we've got kind of like
okay, sure, okay. Just so investors are, as are interested in wondering if the patents are being approached. So that's good information to have, and don't expect you to give out stuff that you can't give out right now. So that's all we need. Let's talk about the market and the go-to-market strategy, because you have, I know, on the go-to-market strategy and the revenue side, you have both a consumer-based plan and also a B2B plan, which I'm going to assume is like going into clinics or CVS's, Walgreens, whatever that might be, that have their own internal vaccination locations.
Yes. So yes, the go-to-market strategy is actually really one of the toughest things to really pinpoint, because I like to think about it by bucketing all needle procedures into 4 different categories. So there's preventative, which is all the vaccines. There's diagnostic, which is all the blood draws that people get. There is medication administration, so all of the biologics, insulin, all of the injectable medications. And, one interesting fact about that, if you look at the top 10 grossing drugs in the United States, something like 8 out of 10 of them are all injectable medications. And most of those are medicines that the patient is injecting themselves at home. So I think that's a really important one to focus on. And finally, there's the elective category, which includes blood donations, but also, I'm a dermatologist, Botox filler, ear piercings, all of these things, tattoo. And so the question is, where do you start? And obviously, COVID has really kind of dictated and shifted the way we plan to roll things out. Especially, as the pediatric vaccine was just approved. And so it's on the top of everyone's mind. And honestly, for my founder's story, one of my passions is to really help prevent needle phobia by treating kids. And so what we want to do is start with pediatric vaccines. And so we would like to do some pilot studies with specific pediatric clinics. We've had discussions with a company that you might have heard of called Brave Care, who's run by a multiple exit founder. And he's basically started pediatric clinics in certain cities, Pacific Northwest, South, where they're really focused on kind of the patient experience. And that's part of what we're offering as well. So we roll it out there. And then what we expect to see happen is, yes, there's this, we are marketing this as a direct to consumer product. So that's why all of the branding will be very intentional and elegant and, something that you want to pick up. And we think that the consumer is going to drive industry to respond. So this is going to create a new standard of care. So, every time you go in to get a shot right now, you expect that they're going to give you a Band-Aid at the end of it. Mm-hmm. But what is that Band-Aid even really doing? It's not doing anything, right? But it makes you feel better. But what if there's something that now every clinic or every, hospital, or every time you get your insulin medication, you open it up and you get a thimble with that? It's really going to kind of change the game, I think. And one of the things that I liken it to, it seems like a bit of a kind of a drastic comparison, but if you think about it, the whole field of anesthesiology is new. Anesthesia wasn't administered until the 1840s. Before that, all you got was a shot of whiskey and they chopped your leg off, and we accepted that. And then if you look yes, exactly. And if you look at, there weren't as many photographs back then, but if you look at the paintings of people's faces when they were getting their legs amputated, it is the same look that a child will give when they're being held down for a shot. And so I think the point is that trauma that we're causing is the same trauma. And if we have an opportunity to prevent that, then we really should.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk then about, we have this market that we know that's there. That's very evident. And we just had a crash here. We're going to have to, video editors are going to have to pause here. What am I looking at for time? My whole light system that I have rigged up here just crashed.
Oh, that's okay. Needed a breather, right?
It's the first time that's occurred, and it happens to be with you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think we're back here. So I guess we can get back into that. I've got lighting enough anyway I'll readjust this at another time, but I think we're okay. So, okay. We're going to take a pause here for the video, guys, and we'll start from here. And now I can reframe where I'm at. Got the market. I kind of lost track of where I was going to flow into now.
Go to market.
Market revenue. Okay, let's talk a little bit about revenue. So, okay. Video editors, now we're going to get back into it. So, that's fantastic. We've talked a little bit about the market now, which is obvious. And let's talk then about the revenue. Do you have a price point that you've kind of already pinpointed for it, and kind of projections, margins, those type of things in regards to the product yet? And how you kind of forecast that out as production goes up?
Yes. And so we're planning to sell an individual patch for $9 each. And then obviously when you sell it in bulk, the price comes down quite a bit. What's interesting, we've done our own market surveys to kind of get a sense of what price people are willing to pay. And it's around that. I think people would like to pay less than $10. But what's also interesting is there's other research that shows that parents would spend up to $80 actually to have their child have a less painful vaccination experience. Wow. So actually there is a range, and I think we have the ability to kind of create an expectation among, because this is kind of a new category of product. That being said, one of our goals is to offer something that is affordable and accessible to everyone. We don't want this to be a luxury product. Everybody deserves the right to have their pain controlled. So we would actually ideally like to push the price down. So we see ourselves as a kind of high margin, high volume, business. And so ultimately, as I mentioned, individual patches sold for $9 each. But then when we talk about partnerships, and this is something that, for example, a Target could offer to every patient when they're coming in for their flu shot. At that point, it's free to the patient, and it's a cost that Target maybe absorbs. And the reason why that makes sense is Target wants people, you've probably driven by and Target says free flu shot here, and we'll give you a $10 gift certificate. Yes. So why do they do that? They want people in their stores. Number one, they get reimbursed, to give the flu shot. But number two, you can't walk into Target and walk out without spending $200. Sure. And absolutely. So, they want people in the door. And so, I will just kind of point out some of the potential questions that people might have. Well, for example, if this has to be left on for 45 minutes, isn't that going to be a problem? Well, if you think about it, it can also be an advantage. So again, that patient that's coming into Target or consumer that's coming into Target, if the pharmacist says, stick this on, come back, after you've done your shopping and we'll give you the shot, that's a win-win-win for the Target, for the patient and for Thimble, you know what I mean? So, and the same way, when you think about that, just to address the timing issue, when you're administering medication at home, it's a really easy thing. You slap this on, you eat your dinner, and then you come back and you do your thing. I think I went off target.
Great marketing sales strategy there. I mean, that's dynamite. Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think that's, pretty self-explanatory. What are the margins right now at the $9 price point?
So $9, it is I got to get my numbers straight. It is I think it's a 40% margin. Hold on, let me just check. I don't want to tell you the wrong answer. I know this is going to break up the.
That's fine. This is all part of it. I said this is a candid conversation. It's all right. Yeah,
what's interesting is we actually got new information over the past few weeks that changed our strategy and changed our changed our pricing actually. So that's why I'm kind of fumbling over the margins. But so when you go direct to consumer with the patch for $9, it's a 78% margin. And then when you scale, the plan is to sell, for example, 100 patches for $500, and then the margin is 60%. Okay. But obviously a volume at that point.
Fantastic. Okay, that's wonderful. Let's talk a little bit about competition. Really, there's not much for competition out there, but talk about competition.
Yeah, that is a great question. So it's shocking, right? Such a huge problem. Sorry, got a patient over here. Give me a few minutes, okay?
Is it going to there? Are she going to demonstrate the patch?
Exactly.
You got a needle there?
One of the guinea pigs, my poor kids. Anyways, so I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Talking about.
We were talking about competition.
Competition, yes. Okay. Right. So huge market. Why is there no competition? Well, I think part of the problem is, as I mentioned, it's not really been addressed in the United States very well. And so what people are doing now, I, as a physician, what I do for my own patients is I will write them a prescription for EMLA. EMLA is a prescription cream that has lidocaine and prilocaine. And so when you combine those two anesthetics, it actually increases the risk of something called methemoglobinemia, which can kill babies. So not a good thing. And so the problem is it's a prescription. So now you don't know what your cost is. It depends on your insurance coverage. You've got to make an extra trip to the doctor to get the prescription. You've got to make an extra pharmacy. So there are lots of barriers for use. And the way you use that medicine is you've got to really glob it on. It's not like a regular cream where you just rub it in. You've got to put a large quantity of medicine, and you must occlude it with either saran wrap. The medicine melts. It presents all sorts of problems. And And again, that was designed to be left on the skin more long-term, 8 to 12 hours. So for it to reach its max efficacy, it actually takes 2 to 3 hours. So that's exactly what we're trying to solve for. So we tried to address all of those things to make something that was easy to use, that works more quickly, that is more elegant, all of these things. So what else is out there? There is another prescription that is relatively new, and it's called Cinera. Cinera is a heated pod with a lidocaine and tetracaine patch. So again, it's got 2 anesthetics, increases that risk of methemoglobinemia, and the heated pod potentially increases the risk of burns. But I really like the idea. Again, it's a prescription. So there's this barrier. And the other problem is I, as a physician, have never heard of it. It's never been marketed to me, and I've never met a physician in the United States that's ever heard of it or prescribed it. So I think it's hard to really change prescribing practices, as a lot of people know. Another device that's out there that's being used, which is does not numb the skin, but does help with needle pain, is something called Buzzy. And it's basically a vibrating toy. It looks like a bee, and it has these ice pack wings. So you have to have a freezer handy, and it's really best utilized in the clinic setting. So the doctor's office should really have it there. They've got to go back and forth to the freezer to get the wings, and then you apply it proximal to the injection site, and it helps distract those nerves that send the message back to the brain. So again, great thing. The price point of that's pretty high, actually. So it's $99 for that device. You can get a smaller one for $49, but the price point is pretty high for what it is, I think. And then finally, there are these over-the-counter creams. Lidocaine cream, the one that works best is what's called LMX4, and that's a liposomal lidocaine cream. But again, people are not aware of it. It's not marketed for needle pain, so people don't know to get it, how much to use, where to put all of these things. So that's what we're trying to solve for.
Fantastic. Well, you've obviously researched well, and then the important thing to point out as well is that some of these, products that you're talking about are prescription based, where yours is an over the counter, correct? So
exactly.
You don't have to worry about that aspect. So that when we're talking anything in the medical field, there's that great old FDA that comes into play. So let's talk about the stage that you're at and the role, the regulatory, stage that you're at, and how that process is looking as far as timeline and milestones goes.
Yes. So we have taken on a fabulous regulatory firm that has given us great guidance, and has deemed that we would need to pursue a 510K, which med device. And we do have a predicate device to kind of compare ourselves to, and they estimate that it would take about 12 to 18 months. That's a conservative estimation, to get through to clearance. And they do not foresee any kind of hurdles. We just have to do the work.
Sure.
So.
Okay. And so when do you project then? So you're looking at probably a couple of years before going into revenue or being able to get the product to the consumer?
Actually, I think that we should be ready to go as soon as clearance comes, because what our plan is to pilot. You do these studies in the interim, and so we plan to kind of pilot. We are kind of forming partnerships with another company that has already established relationships with hospital systems and such, and they are focused on the problem of needle pain, more in the inpatient setting, but we could slide right in and basically take care of the outpatient side of things. And so we have these kind of pilots that show proof, and then we'll also be branded. So we will be building brand kind of equity and brand loyalty and all of that. The other thing is we'd like to start the app side of things immediately. People are getting their COVID vaccines right now. And so we want to be able to offer something. There are a lot of free tools that people could use to help them get through all of their needle procedures. So we want to offer that now, again, to kind of get our name out there, build our brand, so that in 12 to 18 months, we're ready to go. Because we will theoretically have our kind of manufacturing. We're in talks right now with potential manufacturers that have the ability to scale and to scale quickly. And so we'll already be piloting in the thousands. And so, what they're saying is their ability to kind of escalate that, that we should not have a problem. So hopefully sooner than that.
As I refer to it, you're planting the seeds. So yes. So, okay, phenomenal. The one thing we haven't really covered now is the rest of your team. who do you have as far as the rest of your team, and share, what they bring to the table. And you have a solid team, so I'll let you talk about it.
Sure. So my co-founder is Armand Dawkins, and we met, like I said, in undergrad at Columbia, and then he did his MBA at Cornell. He has been in finance for essentially all of his career. He worked for 16 years at JP Morgan, kind of ended up in mergers and acquisitions, and he is now the CFO of a company called Social Live, which is a SaaS business that, well, I don't want to jinx anything, but hopefully good things are happening on that front soon too.
Great.
And so he kind of provides the financial and business acumen that we need. We also have an excellent creative director, Summer Kiraskova. She has her own studio called Season, and she has really spearheaded the brand. And so even what you see in our deck and kind of on our site, that is essentially her working for free. So when we're able to actually pay her, like, her capability is endless. She's worked with huge companies, Amazon, Starbucks, Microsoft. So she's done really incredible work for a lot of huge corporations. So we feel very lucky to have her on board. And she's not just, she started as a copywriter, but that's not really her only strength. She's a real strategy person too, and really has the ability to oversee the brand in a special way. We also have a lot of great advisors. So John Kabul is an ex-FDA person, also has a lot of knowledge about the issues with diversity in kind of pharmaceutical and drug kind of development and all of those things. So she's been a great resource to us. We have some people that are not actually in the deck, psychiatrists and psychologists who are interested in joining, not only in providing content for the app, but also one of our psychiatrists is an MPH as well. So he's very interested in the public health aspect. LeConte Dill is another public health expert, PhD. She just moved from NYU actually to Michigan. And some other great, there's so many people. So Alex Gums is also Columbia undergrad, Columbia MBA, and he had been at Medtronic and is now at Cardinal Health. So a lot of med device experience and knows go-to-market strategy and all of that. Clarence Wooten is currently at X, so he's been through it. He's a founder himself and has run an accelerator, so he knows how to kind of get things off the ground. I don't want to forget anybody.
Yeah. It's okay. I mean, you have a lot. I mean, you don't need to go through all of them. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they'll understand if you couldn't get through everybody. But no, that's fantastic. You have a very strong, solid team from especially some of the companies that the backgrounds of the individuals on your team. So that's always good. Talk about the future projection. What are you looking at as far as your milestones in, as far as, we talked a little bit about, revenue and all of that, but what's the plan for exit? What do you foresee there as far as the runway, the long-term plan there?
Yeah, I really foresee us growing very quickly, because I think this is something that consumers have always wanted and didn't know was available. And we can even see it in our market surveys and even in our beta testing, that people just keep asking for more. And so we really do want to be ready to go as soon as that clearance comes through. And we expect quick growth, and we want to start to plant the seeds of these partnerships early, so we're already starting to talk to, the Walgreens and all of these, potential future, investors and acquirers. Ultimately that's what I see happening. I honestly believe this has the ability to become, I don't want to jinx anything, but I think it does have the ability to become a unicorn, because this is we know healthcare is just a huge industry. And this is the way things are going. Healthcare is becoming more and more of a kind of a customer service business in some ways, but I think this is a really important thing to address. We have to be more empathic. We have to think about the human experience and how it affects people's kind of partaking in the healthcare system. And I think that, this is a good thing that hospital systems are going to recognize, what, this is going to, insurance companies going to recognize, this is going to make people adhere, to interventions that are going to help them and keep people healthy. And so ultimately, who's going to acquire us? I think there are a lot of options out there because, as I mentioned, there's so many categories where we could penetrate. I think, one of the companies that I think makes sense is Becton Dickinson, which is like the largest needle manufacturer. So they want people to keep using needles, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But they're also paying attention to the problem. They know that people hate needles. And so they actually recently acquired a company called Volano Vascular, which helps to minimize the number of needle sticks while a patient is in the hospital. So in other words, they draw blood off of the IV instead of resticking the patient every morning for their morning labs. And they acquired them for a lot of money. And so they see the potential. And we're actually kind of close with the founder of that company. And so it's been a huge resource for us. So that's one area I see. But one of the other ones is actually, one that I talk about, I think in the deck is CVS, or one of these, bigger
Sure.
retail pharmacies. Because as you know, CVS is huge, and they have CVS Health, they have CVS Pharmacy. So they are basically giving every kind of needle there is. And they also want to gain market share. They want everybody to come to them for healthcare. And it's a real way to differentiate. Say, at CVS, we care about the patient's experience. We care about their pain. We have Thimble kind of thing. And so I think there's a lot of potential acquirers.
And like you said, I mean, they at CVS, because of their overall mission, and the way that they market and brand, I mean, come in, here's your free patch that's going to help with the process of getting that shot. And in the meantime, do your shopping and come back and take care of that. And so, it's a win-win, like you said, for everybody. You mentioned investors when we talked about exits. So I would like to ask you, you've already done some raising. You were currently raising $1 million. Is that correct?
We're raising $1 million.
Talk
yes.
about your raise and the usage of funds there.
Sure. Well, so to start, we put in about 175K of our own money. And so we kind of preceded ourselves in a lot of ways. And so now we've started our current raise. We are verbally committed for about 250 of that right now. And we're in talks with a VC who would potentially come in for about 500K, but there's still work to be done on that. And the whole idea is that hopefully that opens the door to another strategic investor to come in to take us to that next level when we need it. And that would give us about 18 months of runway. Okay. And so that would take us through all the way to clearance to be able to sell, to be able to be on the market. And that gets us to a lot of the regulatory work that has to be done, all of the patent conversion, all, lawyers, all of the lawyers.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yes. And through piloting, and also through that web app development that I really think is important. So I think it would get us to a really good position with really solid milestones.
And I am going to throw in that on your deck, you have the breakdown. You have it done very well and, very specific as far as the breakdown of the usage of those funds. So that's important to note. So to end, let's talk a little bit more about investors. What are some of the roadblocks or stumbling blocks you ran into, in raising funds for this? And then I'm going to ask you, what is your ideal investor? Who do you envision as your ideal investor as far as who they're about? And because investors always talk about who their perfect startup is or what that looks like. Talk about what your perfect investor looks like when you share a story about maybe a pain point in fundraising.
Sure. I would say, over the past even few months, it's gotten easier and easier to explain Thimble. I think early on, people didn't really understand that needle pain was a big deal or a problem, and strange COVID blessings, right? So it has gotten easier to explain. I think initially we were talking to a lot of VCs that really are used to later stage companies, and also VCs and investors that deal with non kind of med device products. So, they want to see sales and all of that. And that's how they think of traction. And so I think that was probably initial difficulty. It is always a risk when you have to deal with the FDA. But again, we fairly recently got this news about the 510K possibility, because that was new. We had actually pursued a different version of Thimble up until pretty recently, and so now it's frankly a lot easier to sell. I would say the question about the ideal investor. I think, one of the things that I've learned kind of raising is that, people who don't know medicine or healthcare or science, it's a little bit harder to explain how the process of an FDA clearance works and all of that. And it's scarier for them, I think. But I think somebody who's already seen this and understands what the timing is and what the risk is. And I feel very kind of lucky that we're able to pursue a 510K, because the risk is much, 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 much less. And the investment is much, much less. So I would say an investor who believes in the mission, because for me, that is really important. The idea is to have something affordable and accessible for all. It is not to gouge people, and it is not to, I really do think of this as an impact investment. So I guess I would say that the ideal investor would be somebody who understands health, but yet understands impact, isn't just in it for the money, but understands the vision, and understands that I might do things a little bit differently than the typical, CEO might. And I think that's a very good thing. I think that I might think things differently and take a more long-term approach about things. And I actually think that's a huge advantage that people might not understand. So somebody who actually truly believes in me and our team.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. You've shared so much great information for, the people that are going to be watching this, the investors. And the one thing I have to comment too is on the name Thimble. I mean, I don't know how many of the younger generation even know what a thimble is, but having grown up with a mother who used a thimble when she was sewing and doing all that, what a wonderful, clever name to have for your company as far as protection from the needle and naming it Thimble. So kudos for you for thinking of that. And I think it's, really demonstrates what you're doing so well. And, I want to wish you the best. Thank you for your time. It's been a delight to speak with you and find out more about you and Thimble. And I wish you the best of success in the future.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Have a great evening.
You too.